Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. As 2021 comes to a close, I find myself thinking about the words, I'll paraphrase them, from I believe it's an 18th century thinker who basically said, each year, it's our job to do just a little better than we did in the prior year. And last year, I worked on a few things in my own life. I tried to be a little bit more courageous in a host of areas because I have come to recognize that everything that I want is truly on the other side of fear, and that without vulnerability, there is no courage. And without courage, we really don't get to find out what we're made of. So I really tried to rock those things in 2021. I intend to bring them to the fore in 2022 as well, and hopefully show up even a little bigger. But I thought I'd just share that with you. And I thought I'd share a little bit of what I kind of got on the podcast itself, as well as some of the challenges that I stepped up to, including disclosing some very personal information, both on the podcast as well as in my TEDx talk in 2021, which was on the topic of friendship and adulthood. In that talk, I shared something very personal, and that was that I had experienced a panic attack. It appears to have been related to the fact that I was avoiding one area in my life. I was avoiding my professional life and the fact that I didn't love my work. And I was doing everything I could to push that reality out of consciousness, albeit unsuccessfully. I was happy in virtually every other area of my life, but just not my professional life. And it would appear that avoiding it, at least in part, caused the panic attack. And the only way out was by doing the inconvenient and scary thing, which was changing my career and becoming a psychologist. I shared that because I thought it was important, because panic is so common, and it heartens me to see athletes and people in the public eye sharing their own mental health struggles, taking some of the stigma out of this experience that a great many of us have as we walk through this life. I also shared during my interview with Dr. Laura Hanos-Webb, an ADHD specialist and author, that I am somebody who's worked through that diagnosis myself. I have the inattentive type. So when I was a kid, it wasn't like I was jumping all over the classroom. I was the one who was looking outside the window at the squirrels and imagining all kinds of amazing little stories that were going on with the squirrels in the trees, etc. And as it turns out, I have a lot of great company. A lot of great thinkers have ADHD, various types, whether it's the inattentive, the hyperactive, or the mixed type. And we can all take comfort in knowing that each of us is neurologically different. Each of us has a different gift to bring to the world. And behind every weakness is a strength, and behind every strength is a weakness. And behind this so-called weakness of ADHD is the ability to think more creatively, as well as the call to action to improve in the areas of life that were holding me back. I didn't receive the diagnosis until I was 27, and through therapy, meds, and incredible professional coaching and mentorship, especially from my boss, Martin Dorner, whose memory is a blessing to me, and I think about him every day, I was able to learn what I needed to learn in order to overcome what was holding me back. And I was able to stop taking the medication, which helped me learn the skills that I need to learn. Probably without the medication, while I was learning those skills would have been much harder. But the medication really helped during the skill acquisition period, so that I can show up and be reliable for my friends, family, and the people who matter. And of course, in the context of my own professional life, it doesn't mean that, I'm just an ADHD person and I therefore am creative and I part ways with my personal responsibility. Of course not. It meant years and years of work on my part to overcome some of these challenges so I could somehow show up in these really important domains in life. And I shared my struggle with dyslexia. Again, if you can imagine, they say that people with ADHD are often 3 years behind their peers in their studies and other forms of intellectual development at times. So I refer to myself as a late bloomer, and I'm really happy with the fact that I bloomed late and that I bloomed at all, because there were signs early on that I might not. So I hope that my own story serves as inspiration to someone out there who might be going through something similar where it feels like the odds are against you. You can do this. And what it took in my case was many years of my own coaching and psychotherapy to really get a lasso around these. And when it came to the dyslexia, it was incumbent upon me to realize that I wasn't going to read faster. And in spite of the fact that I'd attended no less than 5 speed reading courses, watching everybody around me learn the skills of speed reading, and I just couldn't learn them. And I just couldn't figure out why. And now it's a big duh. Of course, I was dyslexic. And thankfully, we live in a time where we can listen to audiobooks, podcasts like Super Psyched, for example. And the vast majority of my guests, if they're authors, I will have listened to their book. Sometimes I'll read it, especially if it's not available in audio. And I'm also grateful for the fact that we can read off something like a Kindle and I can make the font really big, which, as it turns out, for me is a personal life hack with my dyslexia. So it's my hope that somehow by my sharing my own struggles in these areas, that in my being real with you all in this way allows you to feel okay with your less perfect parts. All of us have imperfect parts, and yet we struggle so much. We struggle mightily to accept these parts that are far from perfect. And you can take heart in knowing that in Japan, there is a form of ceramics in which the artist will personally implant a defect. And I believe, if I recall correctly, that it's done partially to show that this was in fact created by a human and not by a machine. But at least as importantly, because there is no perfection in this world. One of my guests this year, who I just absolutely loved interviewing, Dr. Luke Reynolds, is a professor at a liberal arts college on the East Coast. And he had written a book about failures and how they're generally inevitable and that they're just costs of getting basically anything that's truly worth getting. So it would be my wish for you all, as you look into 2022 and look back at 2021, to ask yourself, am I taking risks? Am I showing up? There is such a chasm between what we know and what we do. We all know that perfection is not a reality, and yet so many of us are limited and shackled by our desires to be in something that's not attainable, and that is perfection. And can you show up, warts and all, and bring whatever it is, whatever gift you have, into this world, because it needs to be seen. So I'll ask you, take a chance. Accept the fact that 1.0, your version 1.0, your first attempt may not be gorgeous, but it may be the first step to something really cool. At the very least, something healing. A couple of the other things that scared me that I decided to go through doing anyway were giving a presentation to the California Psychological Association, that is the statewide professional organization that my colleagues belong to. I was asked to give a presentation on positive psychology. In other words, the science of happiness, or at least science of fulfillment. And I was utterly terrified to be in front of my colleagues and speaking about a topic so near and dear to my heart. But just the idea, just being under the scrutiny of my colleagues in that way was scary. And it turned out to be incredibly fun, super fulfilling. I had a blast giving it and I got really good feedback. So all of those voices from my childhood, because I was in special education, I kind of have this old ghosts beliefs that I'm not smart enough. I shouldn't be in front of a whole bunch of people with doctorates speaking about this topic because who am I? I'm just the kid who was in special ed. So there are these ghosts that I always have to work through, and they do get smaller over time. Another presentation that was a little bit scary for me was doing one on the topic of self-compassion, the science of self-compassion, to several hundred international employees at Microsoft, all done virtually. So I couldn't see their faces, and they were in countries all over the place. And so I didn't know how I was doing. It turned out it went great. But beforehand, I promise you, I was totally terrified. So stepping up to fear is part of the cost of doing something really cool. And on the other end, I could have face planted. Even if I had, I would need to trust that I would find the internal and external resources to respond in a resilient fashion. And that would be my task. Last but not least, I was looking through the catalog of people who blessed me with their time on the podcast, people who I hold in the highest regard, many of whom I've held in the highest regard for decades, showed up big. Which leads me to something very important that happened in 2021, and that was I had always wanted to interview a survivor of the Holocaust who could speak about it in really clear psychological terms. As many of you know, with each passing year, the number of survivors is greatly reduced, and there will come a time when we can't tap into the wisdom of the people who survived some of the worst atrocities in history and learn from those incredible teachers. Well, as it happened, I was interviewing a hero of mine, a Stanford professor, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, and he mentioned during our interview that he was friends with none other than Dr. Edith Eger, a psychologist and a professor at the psychiatry department at UC San Diego, also the author of two incredible books, The Choice and The Gift, both of which I loved, and I'm not alone. Oprah and Brene Brown and many other luminaries in the field and the field adjacent love her books, and he very generously brokered an introduction. And as a result, I got to meet that goal in 2021 of having someone to represent that voice on my podcast and bless me and my listeners with her wisdom in an episode called Keeping an Open Heart After Tragedy. So to have her voice represented so beautifully on my podcast was a blessing beyond words. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to Edith and all of the guests who showed up for me this year. And I'm so looking forward to the guests who show up in 2022. All right. Wishing you all a very happy new year, and so grateful to have you listening to Super Psyched. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe